1944, the members of the Allied military mission in Moscow met their Russian equivalent, General Antonov, and said, the invasion of the Second Front is ready. The accumulation of troops, the cover and deception plans had been successful. We have not detected any strong German units departing the Pas-de-Calais for the intended area, and we're looking at the last week in May of 1944 for the invasion date. What can you do here on the Eastern Front to help us ensure a successful landing and to minimize German interaction with the launching? General Antonov said, we are planning an operation and we will try to keep it in sync with you as much as we can. And that's as much as the Russians committed themselves to assisting the Allies at that point in April and May. What Stalin was planning was nothing less than the largest land operation in World War II, I might say all of World War II in its entirety, and that's what Operation Bagration was. In June of 1944, the German army was already terribly under strength, and they had completely misread where the Russians, they knew the Russians were in attack someplace that summer. It was the German campaign season of operating as an aggressive element in the summer was now over. They were bled white. There was no offensive mass left really in the eastern, or the Ostheer, or the Eastern Army. It was now Russia's turn to go over to the offensive in the summertime, the German campaign season. By 1944, the Red Army, through trial and error, but learned they did, reached tactical and strategic parity with the German army. They were almost peer relationship at this point, but the great Russian advantage of huge numbers of men and equipment that Germany could not produce. And not only that, but the Russian equipment was not only in parity with German equipment, it was in some cases quite a bit better, especially its T-34 and the upgunned version of the T-34-85 tank, and as well as some assault guns that they were building, the Su-85, the Su-100, Su-120, basically copying German assault guns, but using with Russian, of course, equipment and artillery on them. So it was time now for Stalin to trust his generals to have them launch their own invasion against the German army, and that's where the sink. But Stalin, even though he knew June 6th eventually was going to be the launch date, didn't launch Operation Bagration, the massive Belarusian offensive that consisted of 1.4 million Russian soldiers and thousands of tanks and thousands of aircraft and almost numberless artillery pieces in the field. He waited till June 22nd of 1944 to launch the invasion. The shrewd politician and guy that he was, he thought the Allied invasion was going to be shoved back into the English Channel. The Brits and the Americans are too new at this sort of thing. They don't understand what's going on. So he waited to make sure that the Operation Overlord was a sure thing by holding off 2 weeks. And when they did launch Operation Bagration on the 22nd or 23rd of June, it was basically, he said, oh, to commemorate the German invasion of our country 4 years earlier. That was his rationale for holding off. By that point, in 5 weeks of almost nonstop combat, the two Russian fronts had advanced almost 300 miles and tore the entire center of the German army defenses in Russia. And in August of 1944, they were on the banks of the Vistula River, across the river from Warsaw, Poland. It was an amazing a feat of military prowess and an aggressive intent, and it really did bring the war that much closer to being concluded, and not one division was able to be transferred out of Russia to France to hinder the Allied invasion. Matter of fact, the Germans had to transfer some 25 to 30 divisions into Russia from France, from Italy, from Norway, from the Reich itself to piece back together again the front line there. So it was a massive and successful operation. It did ensure and it contribute to the Allied invasion success in Normandy. The lodgment, the breakout from Normandy was successful about a month or so later in late July. And of course, the rest, as we all know, Paris fell in August of that month. And by the spring of 1945, the Western Allies were on the banks of the Rhine, ready to enter the Reich from the west. And the Red Army at that point was now on the Oder River, about 90 miles from Berlin, and hence the rest of the war. So at that point, that's where the work here in my book sort of comes to an end, describing the contributions of the Red Army to in the offensive in Europe. I'd be happy to